Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Phil from VR Story LLC. Thank you guys for stopping by, checking us out. So today it's a little bit different. We're going to be doing a tips series of videos, or this could be the only series of a number of videos. I don't know how many we're going to do because this is our first one. I have here with me Roivra, who also has another moniker, Chili Frosting, which is actually my account, but he's managed to move ahead in Xortex throughout the top 200 rankings. So it's pretty impressive. And one of the things that he's going to be describing today is what are the strategies to be able to do that effectively. And it does require quite a bit of skill and knowledge of the game, and continuously testing out different ways to improve. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So while that's also going on, you might notice that in the background we also have the video of him playing the game in slow motion. And this is just kind of shows some of the intricacies about the game as well, that there's a lot of very small movements, and there's definitely a method, at least that he's found out that works for him, to be able to effectively get in the high scores. So, Roivra?
Yes.
How you doing?
Good. Yourself?
I'm doing all right. So I guess the first thing we should talk about in this tips and tricks portion is, why don't you just tell a little bit about yourself and what's your background, like work and things like that, and then what kind of led you to continuously play this game and kind of in many senses actually master it.
Well, I started because my son is interested in VR, so I started fooling around, and it's very engaging stuff, initially. And this game particularly appealed because it's very simple in its controls and concept. And and then I found it good as exercise. So I don't play it continuously, but I probably try to get in 3 hours a week at this point, and might get up to once a day for an hour or so. But
okay, so on the other side, so you are Xortex maestro, and
yes, I guess so.
So what are you during the day? So if you're by night a Xortex master,
I work in an office, take care of computer systems and inventory management and general second banana in a small business.
Okay. So basically, so a maestro over there as well during the day, or a maestro of the things that you do there. So now, along with that, what are the type of other, say, hobbies or things that kind of translate to this type of experience in virtual reality? Say other types of sports or activities that you enjoy that maybe help you or give you that I don't know what I want to say here, give you that perseverance. What is it about some of the other hobbies that you have, and with a game like this, really carry over to the interest?
Well, there's a spatial recognition type of thing. Like to play chess. When my knees were better, I used to play a lot of tennis. Used to play war games of various types, board games, and I think all of those kind of fit together. And then I'm just competitive by nature, so I like to do better.
Okay, so this game Xortex, for anyone who's doesn't know what it's about, It's a thing called a bullet hell game, and with a bullet hell game, there's an infinite number of enemies that you have to shoot to continue. And what's particular about this game is that it's an endless wave. So if your ship dies, you start all the way from the beginning. So it's a very unforgiving game, especially if you're in the later rounds or you're feeling very confident about continuing. So think of this as like a kind of like a Pac-Man or a Tetris or even like a Dr. Mario in virtual reality. And it was actually a game that I first started getting into because you were into longbow originally, and then I was like, oh, you should play this game. And I think my highest score was maybe somewhere in the 53,000, 56,000. So I was kind of in the edge of getting into the top 200, and that was one of my goals. And then he just went, once he broke that barrier, he got, much further into the game. And again, so there's quite a bit of mastery there and quite a bit of time that has to be put in. So, what's your take on the game? Like the whole structure, enemies, and then, maybe later on we can talk about how you develop that strategy of moving that game forward from going from the barrier, which is roughly around, I think, 73,000 to get into the top 200. And that's usually a pretty difficult area. Kind of in that 50,000 to 70,000 is a pretty difficult barrier to break. And then once you break that barrier, there's like another type of barrier. So I don't know if I'm describing the game well. I'm kind of simplifying it, but essentially that's what it is.
Well, I tend to think of it as even simpler, that it's kind of like a kid playing with a toy airplane, and in this case, the opposition is not completely imaginary, but virtually real. So, that simplicity of it, it's just point the controller and it shoots automatically, and that's about all there is to it on that level. So that kind of simplicity is enjoyable, but then it's also a little bit like fencing, that you just are waving a magic wand around at shooting at things, but you're wanting to ask about getting better. And I think, one is there's the idea of staying ahead of the curve or seeing the big picture, where you're seeing what's going to happen before it happens. So when you're driving down the road, if you can look way down ahead, you can see things that might be a problem before they become problems. And that's, I'd say, the biggest key to this game, is not being in panic mode because you've lost track of stuff, but watch what's happening and kind of remember it more or less, and the next time you're playing, the same sorts of things happen again.
So tell me about, or tell the audience about, what types of enemies are out there, what type of obstacles that you have to overcome before we kind of delve into the strategy, because I think it's important to point out the types of enemies, and later on we can talk about how you resolve some of those obstacles with those enemies.
Okay, well, I think first thing you run into are little baseballs that shoot at you, and as the game goes along, they shoot a little faster. The second thing that comes along are lightning bugs that chase you around and try and collide with you to kill you.
Okay, just so for the audience, just to let you know, we haven't researched if there were any particular names for these types of enemies that are in the game, so we're just kind of describing them of what they, or Roivra is describing them as something, that resembles something else in the real world. So just
yeah, well, it's as I think of them, and maybe I'm creating the official names today.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
okay. All right. So there's the glow bugs. There's the baseballs.
Yeah, the lightning bugs, the baseballs. Then there are the lasers. These are small objects that work like a double-ended Jedi sword. They radiate out.
Like a Darth Maul, yeah.
And then they spin around, and colliding with laser will kill you. Then the baseballs come in another version, or two more versions really. The first ones described don't really move at all. Then there's ones that move and shoot pretty much the same way. And then there are ones that move and they shoot in a corkscrew pattern. So they're known as cork screwers.
Corkscrew. Yeah, they like to corkscrew everybody.
And then I think I've covered them all except the soccer balls, which are bigger and they shoot pretty continuously. And all of these things increase in difficulty of destroying. The lightning bugs take a couple of hits. The baseball-sized objects take maybe 7 or 8. The soccer balls, I've never really counted, but they're maybe 4 times that. And all of these things will tend to heal if you don't keep at them.
Okay.
They'll take damage, but then they'll heal over time.
So, tell me about how the game is scored with these different types of enemies, with the lightning bugs, the baseballs, with its 3 different types, and then the soccer balls and lasers. Because obviously that's one of the ways to get into the higher scores. So there's definitely a method of accumulating or multiplying your score. Could you describe that a little bit more?
Well, as you kill these things, you gain points. The smaller ones less than the larger ones. And as you go along, there are power-ups that will appear that are just white translucent globes. And as you collect those, your point power doubles. And that's really the key, is collecting those, as they'd be good for 1,000 points a piece as you get deeper into the game. And the first 10 or so double your points for everything else that you kill. So the power-ups are the biggest key to gaining points.
Now, with those power-ups, there's also another type of attack that you can employ in the game, which allows kind of like all the enemies on the screen to vaporize. Now, is that something that you ever use in the game, or?
I haven't done that in months. I don't use a trigger at all. I just point at stuff. Initially, I tried to use that as, the last ditch before getting killed. But if you're paying attention, that last ditch is too late. So you just don't want to get there.
Okay.
It might work for other people, and it certainly helped early on before I got very good at the game.
So it's okay. So that's one of the first strategies, is to avoid using the we'll call it the vaporizer, because essentially, sure. And it seems to the more power-ups you get, the more powerful the vaporizer is.
I'm not sure of that. I think once you have it, it's powerful enough, except, it's just that when you get it initially, there aren't that many enemies around, and then as it goes along, it just, it seems to clear the table pretty well at all levels. But like you say, I just haven't found it effective, because like I say, the trick for me is you're tracking how things are. So you have a mental map of where things are shooting and where they're apt to be shooting and where things are going to materialize and pop up. And when you blow everything away, you destroy the entire map. So everything that's coming back is coming back wherever it happens to come back, and you've lost the context of where you are.
Okay.
So
essentially,
and you've weakened your weapons to some extent.
Okay. All right. So what we have on the screen is you playing the game. Obviously, we have things in slow motion, and part of the reason for this was to kind of detail out some of the kind of intricate movements in the game. And if the audience members out there checking this video out, his score is above the 200 range. I know your typical game is somewhere in the 100 to 200,000, so it's not uncommon. You're at this juncture right here. You're in the almost 250. So could you describe to the people what that is like, getting from 0 and then to the 250 range? What does the progression look like, moving through this?
Well, the game speeds up and slows down at different points. Getting past 50, the game seems to settle down a little bit, and the levels just increase how many enemies there are, and then it kind of thins out and everything vanishes except for the lightning bugs, and things speed up, and there are more of them with each wave, if you'd call it that. And a lot of how fast the game builds up is by how fast you destroy enemies. So if you want to relax, you need to avoid killing as many enemies, and that's mostly possible during the quieter parts of the game, that you can manage to do that.
So what we're seeing here on the screen is some back and forth movement that you're doing, and it kind of resembles, at least at this slow motion pace, it resembles a lot like Tai Chi. Could you describe what you're doing here?
Well, I don't really remember exactly this game, but you notice there's a lot of wrist action, and like you say, I'm moving it back and forth in the space. So one of the things about the game is the glow bugs, the lightning bugs, are chasing you around. So they get to where they're just really not worth bothering with. You just want to stay out of their way. So that drives you from place to place. And then everything else is going to shoot at you. And they do not lead you. So if you're moving out of where they're shooting. So that's, a very basic part of the game, that if you're moving sideways, you're going to be leaving the bullets behind you or to your side. A lot of the wrist action you're seeing is just about efficiency. If you're needing to eliminate enemies, then you want to be shooting at something pretty much all the time. So there I'm shooting at something that I've gone by, and that just makes it efficient, so you're keeping up with the game.
I noticed that with a controller, it's being pointed forward, and it's almost like you're strafing sideways or side scrolling when you're shooting the enemies. Do you ever backpedal or go backwards, or are you always moving forward?
Well, going backwards is a dangerous thing generally. It's like fighting in a jet, I imagine, and jets are made to go forward. You have limited visibility when you're going backwards. You can't really shoot at things that are behind you. So going forward is the thing you want to do. Uh, but of course, if you're in trouble, you can back up. But mostly, you, the big thing about backing up is you're apt to go outside of your vision. And once you're not tracking where you are, and seeing your fighter, then, you're apt to run into things accidentally. So unless you're really sure of what's behind you, you don't want to be backing up. Another aspect to the game that's not too apparent is you don't want to be going too fast either, because you kill something, in due course something else pops up out of thin air, and you don't want to run into things as they materialize or spawn. So if you're not moving too fast, you have a better chance of avoiding things like that.
So typically the type of enemies, because of the range of enemies that are there, which ones do you typically go after instead of other ones? You said the glow bugs you avoid. What are the ones that you typically focus on when the heat's starting to build up? Say you're at 50,000 points and there's a lot of enemies on the screen, or around you, I should say.
For me, the ones that I have the hardest time tracking are the lasers, so I try to get rid of them as fast as possible. But lasers swing around a pivot point, and they're consistent in their motion. They're rotating in one plane the entire time that they exist. So once you really know where they are, you can avoid them, but it's hard to keep track of more than a few and avoid them as things are chasing you around. So, and for me, it's a matter of depth perception's a little bit off, so I like to get rid of them as fast as possible, as they're my nemesis.
So that's a curious thing too that he brings up in this interview. So you're actually legally blind, or partially legally blind, or
no,
something.
It's not that bad, but I have very bad vision in one eye.
Yeah. So, and that adds another factor to the whole thing, that you're able to do this with another level of difficulty compared to someone that might have, exactly 20/20 vision. I know for me, my vision is not 20/20. I'm nearsighted, but wearing the headset, I don't have any issues with focus. But definitely, I have issues with focus playing this game. I pretty much threw in the towel early on. Part of it was level of frustration, but at the same time, I mean, I know for me, I've definitely spent several evenings playing this game for a couple of hours, and it was always just one more game, and then with that, I typically would get pretty hasty, and then take uncalculated risks that would eventually bring me back to the very beginning of the game, where you start from square one. So again, there's a little bit of like emotional management, I guess, to
Oh, that's a definite factor. With me, like I say, I try to play it often enough, some light exercise, and so there are times I'm playing that I'm not particularly into it, but trying to keep up the routine, and but I think the emotional aspect of the frustration level is definitely something to try and manage, because if you don't enjoy it more or less, you're not going to want to do it. And so managing your goals is a part of that. So most people want to focus on their best scores, but I've only had one best score so far, and I only will ever have one best score. So that's not a day-to-day thing to focus on. So rather than think I'm going to play every game and win to the highest level, I'll take it as like training games, and where I'll try and think of different things to try out. When knowing I was going to have this interview, I was trying to think back to when I was starting and, how it's evolved for me playing the game. And, I think one of the things that's constant is that idea of staying ahead of the curve, of not being surprised by what's happening. So, of course, when you're first starting, you don't know what to expect, but the game starts, relatively slowly, and, you can move around for a while and you see what unfolds, and then the next time, it's very similar. And, so the first trick is to survive and find a safe place to be and keep moving to new safe places and kill some enemies as you go along, and learn, the lightning bugs tend to spawn to the sides. If you're looking at the scoreboard, they tend to spawn on the outside edges of the game to the left and right. So you don't want to be there and have something materialize right where you are, because Captain Kirk knows that can't happen. It's not a good thing. And then
we need to go to this area in the room to protect ourselves from the lightning bugs.
And then the lasers also, they seem to spawn, not right in the center of the room, but near the core and near the half towards the scoreboard. And then most of the other things tend, the place where you're starting the game, where you naturally stand to pick up your fighter initially, is probably tends to be the quietest area, but you can't stay there because everything's going to shoot at you. But and the larger things tend to spawn in the core of the game, more or less, in the center. And so, being around the fringes, away from the scoreboard, but not too close to the walls, is probably generally the safest area. Although when you have a few things, being further away from them gives you more time to react.
Okay, so to summarize, it's really, so you want to be able to stay ahead and anticipate that the enemies will just kind of pop up at certain areas. And then on top of that, when the projectiles are being shot at you when you're playing the game, you want to move to a kind of a clearer spot within the confines of the game, and then shoot the enemies that are much larger or take more shots to take care of. So the the lightning bugs are the ones that you avoid, and you try to take out the lasers first, along with the other kind of larger enemies in the game, and then continuously moving forward to be able to and not moving back, because sometimes those enemies can spawn in those locations.
Yeah, or they're just chasing you when you're backing into them. But yeah, that sums up a lot of it. Beyond that, I'd say another key aspect to the game is that everything respawns. There are those times that I say are relatively quiet, but barring those, you kill something, it comes back fairly quickly as itself or something else. And so, that's why I tend to not waste my time with killing the lightning bugs, because I find them pretty easy to avoid, and if I shoot them, they'll just be right back. So it's easier to keep track of them if they're not dying off so fast and respawning in different places. So I know where they are when they're just right behind me most of the time, or most of them.
All right, that sounds pretty good. So all you people out there that have stopped playing this game, or maybe just taking a little break, this might be a good time to consider jumping back on the on that wagon and see where the chips fall. Maybe you can get up in the top 200. I know in certain scenarios you might have gotten up there out of luck or anything like that. Of course, that's some good bragging rights, but we'd like to see some more some more people get up there in that range where the competition level will increase. And again, so right now, currently Roivra holds the ninth spot, and again, not hacking the game or anything like that, just continuously playing the game, is in ninth place and also in 15th on the Roivra account, and then you hold another position as well on another account. So, and again, consistently reaches past the top 200 whenever he plays. So it's great that he's able to be able to give us some tips on how to do that. But just out of curiosity, in getting into the 400,000 range, how long do you have to play, or how long do you have to play perfectly?
Well, the whole game you have to stay alive, so that's perfect enough. But I'm not sure how long it takes. I mean, if you're thinking about what the clock is doing, you're just bound to die, or I am at least, because you get into it and you're just doing it. My guess is that probably took about 35 minutes or more.
All right, guys, 35 minutes to get in the 400,000 or 450,000 range. So imagine getting into the million range. You're going to be playing for about an hour of just super intense Xortex game playing. So I don't have any more questions. I think that's a good way to kind of end it there. So
Sure.
Keep playing virtual reality. Also continue to play Xortex if you have either an HTC Vive or Oculus Rift or Windows mixed reality headset. And for more information about virtual reality or how to book an event, visit www.avrstory.net. I'm Phil here with Roivra. Thank you guys for joining us, and be on the lookout for more updates and videos, and hopefully if we can interview more people with tips and tricks, we like to be able to do that as well. So thank you very much.
And have fun.